Good evening, and welcome again to Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott, and while you hear the music in the background, it's a good introduction because we're going to be talking about music tonight. Those who watch the show regularly know we like to visit with the community of the arts here in the Chicago area, and our guests tonight, Tim Semanik and Am Doemland from the Northwest Symphony Orchestra. Semanik. Tim Semanik. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Second time's the charm. So Tim and Ann, welcome to the show. It's good to have
Thank
you
you.
here. So music is one of my favorite subjects because, as we talked about before the show, I myself play music in a jazz funk band, so I'm always interested in music. But classical music is something that I haven't had any personal experience with other than going to hear symphonies, but I've never played it. And so I'm always fascinated by classical music because the music I play is largely improvisational, and in classical music it's less so, right? And there's some room, but generally it's what's written is what's played. So my question musically, to start out, is how do you draw the meaning or the emotion out of the music that has been written long ago, that has been played any number of times by any number of musicians? And particularly, I guess, Tim, as the conductor and music director, how is it that you are able to, what do you do to try to draw out the actual musicality of the music that's on the paper?
Well, I think that with classical music and all the great classical repertoire, it's lasted. The older pieces, they've lasted this long because of their ability to speak to people in different eras and different times. And of course, everybody brings their own individuality to the piece as a performer. And so it's as opposed to improvisation, we're dealing with the music that is written down. It's still, there's so much there. There's so much depth to it, to most of it. I mean, we do play lighter fare sometimes, but there's so much depth to there. It's like a great novel, if you would, that you could just read again and again and again and get new things out of it. My job as the conductor is to bring those different viewpoints, or any conductor for that matter, to bring those different viewpoints together to kind of create a cohesive element in itself.
So actually, I want to come back to that because I'm always fascinated by the act of conducting itself and how that, because you don't actually get to touch anything.
No.
You're just up there with the wand.
Right.
And how that is able to draw the music out of all of the players. But before I go there, let me backtrack a little bit. Anne, before the show, you mentioned that your mother was involved in the founding of the Northwest Symphony.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about how that got started. And first of all, the Northwest Symphony plays mainly out in the northwest suburbs, right? Which, hence the name. So how did it get started, and why, and when?
Well, I think the first meetings about it were in the fall of '52, and the first concert was in the winter or spring of '53. My mother was a violinist. She went to Chicago Conservatory, which is now part of Roosevelt, and she played in a string quartet. They used to play once a week in our living room, and they knew some other musicians, and there was a group of musicians mainly in Park Ridge and Des Plaines, which at that time there was just one main township high school, and it covered those two areas. So, who really thought they maybe could find enough people to have an orchestra, but they needed a conductor. And lo and behold, a man named Perry Crafton, a young violinist who was in the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, moved into Park Ridge. He had also studied a lot of conducting and really wanted to conduct. So this was just perfect. And they got together, so all these musicians, actually the concertmaster was a dentist, and he was a superb violinist. He probably could have been professional, but he did like dentistry too, and it's a lot easier way to earn your living. You know? So there were a lot of good musicians around, and they formed this orchestra. My brother, who was 2.5 years older than me, played in it from the first. He was also was a percussionist, and so am I.
And you also play in the current orchestra as
What?
well.
Yeah.
You play today. you
Right,
know.
right. Yeah, so I played, when I was in high school, I played some, and then I was out of the area for a long time and came back in '89 and have been playing for the last 30 years. But Perry Crefton was a marvelous conductor, and he was with the orchestra for almost 40 years, at which point he was slowing down and he knew it. And we got a man named Paul Vermel, who had just retired from teaching at the University of Illinois, and he was with us for 19 years until he was 89 and decided it was time to retire.
Yeah.
And then we had a woman named Kim Dinelt, pardon me, for 4 years and a year of searching for another director, and then Tim is in his second season with us, and we're very glad to have him.
As am I.
Yeah, he's you know, in terms of, but it's true, you know, we as musicians, our job is to fulfill his vision of things, and he certainly puts it across very clearly to us.
So Tim, what attracted you to the Northwest Symphony?
Well, I knew some of the players already from other orchestras that I'd work with, other performing ensembles that I'd work with, but it's that type of group always tends to attract me. I'm dealing mostly, almost exclusively with volunteer musicians. Again, a lot of them are people that could have gone into the musical career and could have pursued it as a career and decided to do something else. So you get people with just a genuine love for what they're doing and a genuine enthusiasm, even if they're not the most polished performers sometimes. You have more of a different type of energy that I love working with.
That's interesting to say, because we think, and I've been to hear the Chicago Symphony, and we know that those are all magnificent musicians in the orchestra, but that you can create orchestral music out of a group of volunteers who really, you know, they have other jobs, they have day jobs, and this is a hobby rather than a job. And that the difference being that the professional, if I understand correctly, although they're professional because they love music,
Right.
They approach it with a different view because it's also a job. Whereas for the people you're talking about, this is their opportunity to do this thing that they don't normally get to do.
Right.
Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Yeah, and sometimes I'm in awe talking to some of the players, and they say, well, I've been up since 4 in the morning and I'm a trader or something, and so I've worked for 12 hours, and then I drive out here to come do a 3-hour rehearsal on Monday morning, and I think I have to kind of remind myself that for them it's something that is a sort of an escape sometimes. Maybe, you know, it could be me going to play golf or something, somewhat similar to that. Yeah. Although I think they have a little bit more invested in it than my golf game. So,
yeah. Well, actually, I find that myself. When my band rehearses, they're definitely, and we rehearse mostly in the evenings and sometimes Sunday afternoons. And it's the same thing. I may come home and I'm just beat, and the last thing in the world I want to do is go to a 3-hour rehearsal. But what I find is that at the end of the rehearsal, I'm completely jazzed about it. I'm completely re-energized and could play another, hour, except my neighbors would complain.
Well, it's, for those of us who play, it's a great joy. I play the piano too, and that's fun, and I will sometimes work hard in learning a new piece and stuff, but to be part of this whole that is the orchestra is a remarkable experience, and the need to be faithful to the music and faithful to the conductor's vision, but there's a great joy in creating this music together, and there's, in a larger way than you do in any other situation except a large fine chorus maybe.
Well, I understand that. I actually have found that in my own musical experience of being on stage, and that may be just a small club somewhere, but nonetheless being on stage and suddenly feeling, and because we play a more improvisational style of music, suddenly realizing the band is doing something that's really cool.
Yeah.
and that may or may not have been planned,
Mm-hmm.
and that you're part of that,
Mm-hmm.
and you're actually helping to create that. In fact, years ago, one time I was playing a straight-out rock and roll band, bar band, and I had this almost out-of-body experience where I felt I'm actually not even playing this music anymore. I'm just plugged into it. So I'm a radio receiver, and I've connected with this music, and it's just coming through me. I'm not actually creating it. And it was such a wonderful, it's that feeling. It's that feeling that you've connected with this thing that's larger than you, and you're part of it, but it's more than just the sum of the parts.
I think that's the experience that we all
Yes.
go for, and I think we probably have had those experiences
Yeah.
as well. They're very similar for a lot of people, and that's the goal. That's what
Yeah.
we're shooting for.
Yeah,
And
that's
in
why you
the
play,
end,
right?
besides your own joy at doing it, it's a gift to make this, in your case, to have this music come spontaneously, in our case, to take the dots on the page and make them real.
So there also I'm sure it must be limitations to working with volunteers and amateurs. How do you handle that as a conductor in particular, as you're rehearsing them? There will be certain things that maybe you could do with a professional orchestra that you can't with this. So how do you work with that limitation?
Sure, there are repertoire constrictions sometimes that we have just because of numbers or space or ability. I don't want to overwhelm people. It's hard to find. Sometimes it's difficult to find a balance. You're searching for that balance of how can we challenge them and make them feeling like this is something exciting and fulfilling, and yet not feel overwhelmed. So that's what you're always kind of going between. Whether it's with the Northwest Symphony or with students that I teach, I'm beginning to discover that I tend to err on the challenge side of things because for the most part, people tend to rise to the occasion. And if you underwhelm them with something that is easily doable, they go to that occasion. They go to that level. Basically, we can do this. This is no problem. We don't need a bunch of rehearsals. But if you kind of push them in that capacity, they tend to get to that point. And with us, and with our group, and with the players, also, we want to put on a perfect, polished performance. But we can also say to most people, your livelihood does not depend on this performance.
Right.
Maybe my livelihood does, but the performers don't. So just go for it and have a good time and enjoy it and feel something and emote something. That's much more important than trying to get some perfect cookie cutter, I don't know, whatever thing out there.
Well, just,
Can I say that I think Tim has been doing a very good job of this. The audience members this was our 5th concert with them that we played in October, because we do 4 a year. And people were saying, oh, this is the best concert yet. And so the feedback is that what he's doing is really right on in terms of how much we're capable of.
In fact, speaking of audiences, we have a clip that I'll ask our crew to tee up in a moment of Tchaikovsky, and there's a standing ovation, I believe, at the end of the clip. That will show, right? So we'll get to that in just a minute. But I understand the issue of feedback from the audience, which is an integral part of performing anything. In any performing art, requires that connection with the audience, right? And so, how do you try? I mean, we talked before the show a little bit about audiences that don't respond, and how do you work through that? How do you work with that if the audience isn't really reacting the way you think that they should?
Plain and simply, I guess you carry on, and you don't expect it. You have to perform, sing for yourself and for the people that you're playing with first, and then you hope that the result is what you want it to be. And you can't sometimes determine that, if people come in and they might just be having a bad day, or their mind is elsewhere, or they, it might have nothing to do with your performance per se, so you really can't take it. You have to, as a musician, you have to develop.
Give it your best
You have
no
to
matter
develop
what.
thick skin too rather quickly because there will be
Yes.
people that will tell you
Yes.
and explain to you all the things that you've done incorrectly.
Yes.
And there's a lot of experts out there, so you just
Yeah.
have to kind of find your own balance and your own piece to go forward with that and not worry so much about the response. Sure, yeah, you always want a standing ovation and you want people coming in and you want to be sold out, but you have to do your best. And I think if you do that and you're honest and you have that integrity, it'll come out.
Well, we'll get this clip up here and we'll take a look, because this is one of those times where I think you were able to make that connection and get that kind of integrity. Well, it sounded pretty good to me. Now, but I have to ask you, because this happens to me all the time, where if I see a video of my own performance, I hear everything I think I missed.
Sure.
Right? And other people listen to it and say, oh, man, well, you're nuts. It was great. It was fine, whatever. I'm sure you must have the same experience, right?
Of course. But I think this also speaks to the importance of seeing a live performance, in that you can go back and you hear a recording and you can pick out mistakes, but you don't have the same energy that you feel when you're at the performance, and sometimes it doesn't matter. I've had so many performances that I've been involved with where I get done and the orchestra and the audience and everyone just says, oh, that was fantastic, that was just absolutely wonderful. And you go back and you listen to the CD, the recording, you know, a couple months later, and you're like, I don't know, well, it wasn't that wonderful, but that was the experience. And again, we don't have to have that perfection. You need to kind of create that energy. And which is why a piece like this, Tchaikovsky 4, this is pretty much, over everyone's head. And I think it's over my head because I still have a lot to learn about the piece for sure. But you rise to the occasion and create this excitement and create this moment. And I certainly think we achieved that there, if not getting every single note exactly right.
Well, and I think the audience agreed with that completely from the reception you got. And I'll have to tell you, in the decades I've been playing, I have never played a perfect gig.
Of course not. It doesn't exist.
Right, it doesn't exist.
No one has. Yeah.
Right. So we always know that there's some level. But I think you're right. I like the idea of this interaction with the audience and the energy that's created in a live performance that is, it's a moment in time. And it is its own entity, really. That can't really, there's nothing wrong with recorded music. We'll always have a lot of it. But there's something about that live performance, that connection in the moment with the audience, where you get that level of energy, right?
Yeah. Well, you probably know that as an audience member, having been an audience member plenty of times. You know that time where you say, oh, it's 10 degrees outside, and do I really want to get on the train and go downtown and see something? But then you show up and you think, oh, this is so much better than me sitting in the dark, listening to recordings. Not that there's anything bad with that. Sometimes that's very enjoyable as well. It's a totally different experience, though.
In fact, yes. In fact, one of my complaints about some professional bands, actually, not to name them, but you two, who I went to see years ago, and it, even though it was a live performance, it struck me as being very canned. And I kind of came away thinking that I hadn't really seen a live performance.
Yeah.
And I think that you do feel that if it is too polished, you can get to a point where it loses that energy we're talking about. Right? So it seems like there's that kind of balance between the energy of the moment and the need to get it as close as you can to being perfect.
Sure, and if you go and if you see someone like a band that's been on tour for 2 months, then
Yeah.
you know sometimes they just might have a bad night, or if you go to see some Broadway show that's been running for 10 years and it's like,
They're off
okay,
that
we've
night.
done you
Yeah.
know this, and maybe
Yeah.
they can't find that
Spark
yeah, that
that
spark
night.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So what keeps you coming back, Anne? Do you keep playing and you keep being
I
the
just
president? And
love it.
what's the toughest thing about being president? And what do you have to do as the president
Well, we have
and
a,
chair of the board?
right. We have no employees except for Tim. So there isn't any staff to do the work. The board has to do the work. And I'm mainly retired at this point in my life. So I have some time, and so I do things like drive up to where the stationery is stored at one printer's and drive it to the place where the letter's going to be printed on it, and all, I mean, you know, all kinds of really
Hands-on.
just hands-on and not very exciting things, but we also have a real responsibility for the orchestra financially and also many other ways, just to get the programs out each time and all that kind of thing.
How do you keep the orchestra financed?
We have fundraising, most of it comes from a once-a-year fundraising letter, I've got to say, and because ticket sales certainly don't pay for it, but they don't pay for the Lyric or the Chicago Symphony either, you know, whatever end of the scale you're on. And we have, most years we get a grant from the Illinois State Council for the Arts, which helps. But mostly we depend on individual contributions, and people come through enough to make us be able to be
It's been going
in the
now
black
for,
most years. We certainly were last year. Yeah.
and
So
it's been, what, 60-some years, 65 years? Or that the orchestra has been in existence for 60-plus years now,
yes,
right?
60, 67, 68,
67.
something like that. Yeah.
Okay, so what are some of the toughest challenges you face, other than fundraising? What are some of the toughest challenges you face in trying to manage this whole operation?
Well, right after I got elected, we got told we weren't going to be able to perform in the space we usually perform in because of the school district lending it to a different high school. In the end, we were able to, but we went crazy with this, trying to find another venue. And then our orchestra director, who had already resigned as at the end of the next season, suddenly got a lot of contracts for composition, which is what she really most wanted to do, and was going to have to miss concerts, and finally just ended up not doing the year, and we had to get right away a conductor for the first concert, and then after that we already had luckily we had a group in place already to look for a new director, and so that year was wild, you know, and I had to do a lot more than usual because there was no music director. But then at the end, now we have Tim, and
Things have settled down.
yes,
A little more under control.
no more crises of that sort. But you do what you do, and
Yeah.
we all loved the orchestra, and we had to make sure this worked, and it did.
Now, I'm assuming you have a website as well, right? And
We do.
And we'll see if we can get that put up here. There we go. So anyone who's interested in pursuing this or coming to a performance can find all of this. How do you recruit musicians? How do you get people to come in and play for you?
Some of them play with other groups that I am with, or they're friends of groups that I have conducted before, or friends of people that are already playing in the orchestra or play in other orchestras. There's a number of community-based orchestras in the Chicago area, so sometimes there's a lot of players that play in different groups throughout the area. We also we'll advertise it a little bit. It's hard to. We can't just say, oh, if you own a violin, come play with us. We want you have to have,
Right.
as you can tell, you have to have a certain level of it.
Right.
But it kind of speaks to what I was talking about earlier, kind of creating a challenging, enjoyable environment so that the word gets out. That's been my biggest goal, I guess, is to have everyone say, oh, why don't you, the best thing for us is word of mouth from other players to say, hey, you should come play in this orchestra. It's really great. We have a great time. We play great music. Come join us. That's the best way I found.
And so I assume you never have a shortage of musicians because there are people who are always interested to play.
Well, we've had a shortage because sometimes where it's not. I mean, when you're with a community, a volunteer orchestra, you can't say, well, if you don't come play, then we're not giving you a paycheck.
Right.
So it's sometimes just because of scheduling, we might have a concert where we're struggling to get all of those people to come. And we're building, and we've just in the couple of years that I've been there, we've gotten numbers back up to where they were. I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, and so we're just trying to get to that space where we can miss a few people and still, survive and thrive.
So what do you have coming up? What shows are in the near future?
We have a sing-along Messiah that we do annually at the First Presbyterian Church in Arlington Heights with a group of great soloists, including the music director there. And then we have 3 concerts.
When?
That is Sunday, December 1st at 4 p.m.
Okay.
And then we have 3 concerts in the new year. The first one is February 16th, Sunday, February 16th. It's with our concerto winner. She's a fabulous high school student playing the Cacciatorian Violin Concerto, and we're doing Sibelius First Symphony as well. And then we have a second concert in the new year is April 19th, Saturday, I believe.
These dates are all on the website.
Yeah,
right?
they're all on the website.
Right.
We're doing Beethoven at 6, and then we have a concert on the 3rd Sunday in May. We're doing an afternoon of opera with a couple of local singers, so it should be a lot of fun.
Actually, I have good friends who run the Petite Opera out of Park Ridge, and they've actually been on the show a number of times. And you are, by the way, are always welcome to come back. When Petite Opera has a show that they're getting ready, they usually come on and we talk about it. So as you get closer to performances, we're always welcome. You're always welcome to come and hawk the show, right? So what are your plans? I mean, we only have about a minute and a half left, but so what are your plans? I would say, musically, where do you want to go with this orchestra?
I just kind of want to continue on in the vein we're going of being able to do a greater variety of music, a more demanding music, maybe some more contemporary pieces or newer music as well, which can be very demanding. We have the space we play in is not, I don't know if you could tell, it's not ginormous. So we're looking for opportunities to play in different spaces where we might do collaborations with choruses or opera companies or things like that. And so we're trying to just build up. The space is nice in the size for where we are right now. So we're just hoping to grow in numbers and in quality so that we have the ability and the flexibility to take on whatever we need to do or
I
would
can't
like
think
to
of a
do.
better way to sum up, and believe it or not, we're out of time already. So Tim, Ann, thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us again on Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott. You can find us every Saturday night at 8 on Comcast Channel 19 or see us on the web at publicperspective.tv. So until next time, thank you and good night.